Welcome to the More to Know podcast. My name is Kimberly Hawes. Today we're sitting down with Laura Grannemann. She is the executive director of the Gilbert Family Foundation and Rocket Community Fund. How are you doing today, Laura?
I'm great and thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I know I'm excited to talk with you. It's been a while since we caught up. Maybe before we get started today, you can just remind our readers and our listeners what the Gilbert Family Foundation is and what the Rocket Community Fund is.
Yeah, the Rocket Community Fund is the philanthropic arm of Rocket Companies, and our focus is really on helping as many Americans as possible get access to stable housing and particularly home ownership. And the Gilbert Family Foundation is the private family foundation associated with Dan Gilbert, who's our founder and chairman at Rocket Companies. It is primarily focused in two places. First, on building opportunity in Detroit, and second, in curing neurofibromatosis, which we won't focus as much on today, but is very exciting and very, very important. The two organizations are actually run together. I'm the executive director of both because we overlap so significantly around our work focused in the city of Detroit. So while the Rocket Community Fund is focused on home ownership primarily, the Gilbert Family Foundation in Detroit works on other elements of housing stability, arts and culture, public space, and economic mobility.
Okay. And so, since they do work, like you said, so closely side by side, and much of the work overlaps, as we go through this today, maybe you could just point out for us, like, if one initiative is led more by
Sure.
Rocket Community Fund or the Gilbert Family Foundation, just so we have that clarification. Would that be all right?
Absolutely, no problem.
Awesome, thank you. So, how have the Rocket Community Fund and Gilbert Family Foundation strengthened housing stability in Detroit? Of course, that's going to be on the front of mind for all of our readers.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, the Gilbert Family Foundation and Rocket Community Fund back in 2021 made a joint commitment of $500 million deployed over 10 years to building opportunity in the city of Detroit. And so we believe, especially at Rocket Companies, that opportunity begins with a stable home. You really cannot see success in education, in your work life, in your community life without first having that stable foundation of a home. And in the city of Detroit, there are so many opportunities to support housing stability. We have a relatively low value market in the city compared to some other areas of the country. But that doesn't mean that opportunity abounds for especially our lower income residents in the city of Detroit. It can be really difficult to access homeownership or access stable homeownership, especially with some of the challenges that we have associated with aging housing stock, with accessing financing. For example, some of our mortgage comparables are non-existent or are challenging to compare home values to. Therefore, financing can be more difficult. And we, in particular, have struggled with property tax foreclosure for many years in the city of Detroit. And while we're making a ton of progress on that, property tax foreclosure still is a challenge because so many of our residents are lower income and their property taxes are increasing or are, can just that can be a burden on an annual basis. Our property taxes are very high in the city of Detroit. So all of these are ways that we across the two organizations have really worked to systemically address housing stability and help people get access to homeownership.
Hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about property tax foreclosure and the challenges that it presents, not just the people of Detroit, obviously that's where your focus is, but to people throughout the country who may be on a fixed income. And then when those tax bills keep on going up, they start to feel like their property may be in danger.
Yeah. Property tax foreclosure is a big challenge in the city of Detroit. Over the course of about 15 years, we had about 150,000 property tax foreclosures. To put that into context, we have about 250,000 residential properties. So a significant portion of our city experienced a property tax foreclosure, and that's also contributed significantly to the loss of population in the city of Detroit. At Gilbert Family Foundation, this was actually the very first investment that we made associated with our $500 million commitment. We said there actually is a property tax exemption for individuals who are below a certain income level. It's about 130% of the federal poverty line. And we essentially said, if you can apply for that exemption, which will cover your current year's property taxes, the Gilbert Family Foundation will wipe out all of your back taxes. And that allowed people to have a clean slate. And now that they know about the tax exemption, they're able on an annual basis to get access to that tax exemption. When we first started this work, we had about 3,000 people annually applying for that tax exemption. Today, we have closer to 25,000 people annually applying for that tax exemption. So you can see now it's much better access to resources, much better access to information, and people are more empowered to go through that process, which is incredible. We've seen about a 95% decrease in property tax foreclosure. However, that does not negate the need for some pretty significant tax reform. We in the state of Michigan have some big tax policy challenges that are really affecting the way that the city of Detroit is able to operate. Specifically, we have the highest property tax rate of any major municipality in the country. So it's an important revenue source for our city, but it's also a large burden on our residents. So while philanthropically we are aiming to ease that burden for the most vulnerable residents, we also as a community need to invest in research, coordination, collaboration to try to address the underlying property tax policy challenges.
Absolutely. And that work can be done, and I'm sure that it's being addressed on the broader scope, but it's really great to hear those numbers with the 95% down and then the number of applicants, because that means that the word has spread, right? The numbers were there, but now the word has spread and more people are looped in to what they have available to them. All of it, of course, goes back to housing stability. And I know something else that you folks work on that I want to touch on today was what you do to help people that are facing eviction in the city of Detroit.
Yeah, there are two primary challenges that we start with. I think the most important thing for us is that we're supporting long-term Detroit residents to be able to grow with the city and see their opportunities increase as the city is growing and thriving. And we primarily help people who are either at risk of property tax foreclosure or at risk of eviction. And interestingly, sometimes those two can overlap. For example, we started a lot of our work with a door-to-door survey. We call it neighbor to neighbor, where we paid Detroit residents to go talk to their neighbors about property tax foreclosure resources. And specifically, they were knocking on the doors of every property that was behind on property taxes. So annually, about 65,000 properties. And what we learned from that was that about 52% of the people that we were talking to were actually renters living in a landlord's property where the landlord had not paid their property taxes. So this is an interesting case where they would be potentially at significant risk of eviction. But we were able to, because we had done that door-to-door outreach and then had some very specific data about those families and about their interest in purchasing the property, we were then able to take that information to the city of Detroit and say, hey, Rocket Community Fund is very interested in helping people become homeowners. Can we, Rocket Community Fund, essentially pay for the back taxes associated with these properties and offer these families the first right to purchase their home? And so through that process, which we call Make It Home, we've now been able to create about 1,800 new homeowners. That's a really beautiful way to essentially take a system that's kind of broken and failing a significant number of people and basically use it. Instead of being a vicious cycle, it's now a virtuous cycle. So
Yeah.
that's one example of, I think, where we just have to be creative about some of the challenges that exist and start to build opportunities for people that are maybe falling through the cracks. Another really significant way that we support renters is through the Detroit Eviction Defense Fund. What we learned was that about 85% of landlords are represented through the eviction process by a lawyer. And prior to this investment, about 4% of tenants are represented by a lawyer through their eviction process. And as you might expect, this leads to some pretty disparate outcomes. And so the Detroit Eviction Defense Fund provides resources to tenants who are going through the eviction process to either receive full legal representation or receive counseling to help support them by connecting them to other resources like other housing options through that eviction process. And we've, as a result of that investment, been able to support over 10,000 families who are right at that point of unfortunately losing their home.
Right. And that could be for any variety of issues. And like you said, that's
Correct. Yeah.
10,000 families, not
Families.
individuals.
Yeah.
So much, of the work that you're doing there is supported and the people of Detroit are supported by a strong economy. And so tell us about the money that's being invested in employment and economic mobility programs.
Well, again, everything starts with a stable home, but I think opportunity is really unlocked by having access to employment that provides you, um, a real pathway to grow your income and also to do work that's dignified and important to you as an individual. And so our work on the economic mobility side is really focused in a few different places. First, on small businesses. We talked to many of the people that we serve, and about 50% of the families that we talked to had some type of side hustle, some type of business that they were operating on the side. But the vast majority of those individuals, they weren't certified, they didn't have licenses, they didn't know how to scale or what resources could help them scale this sort of side hustle or business that they had. And so that's a significant portion of the work that we do, investing in helping people build their own businesses and helping small businesses that exist be able to access resources to scale. Perhaps, the next rocket companies is
Yeah,
have
exactly.
been
You never
started,
know.
right?
It
And
could
we
it could be a side hustle somewhere.
That's right. That's right. And they need the resources to be able to grow, and then therefore they become a major employer in the city of Detroit. So that's a significant part of our strategy. The other side is investing in high growth, high demand career pathways. So in Detroit, that looks like primarily technology, healthcare, and manufacturing, um, as well as construction. So we have this long legacy in the city of Detroit. We build things, we create things, and I think we're all extremely proud of that. We're not just the middlemen that are helping people connect to the resource. All of us have side hustles. We all are building products, and everyone really takes pride in that. And so I think a lot of our economic mobility work really is oriented around building, construction, manufacturing, technology.
Different forms of innovation. Speaking of innovation, so much of our ability to be creative as human beings comes from having a well-balanced life. And I noticed in the press release that you guys had sent out in March, kind of highlighting where you have gotten in the last 5 years. There was discussion about the money invested in public life initiatives. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, Laura.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we believe strongly is that as individuals get access to stability and opportunity, we want them to be able to choose Detroit. So often in the past, individuals have felt stuck in Detroit because they can't sell their home. No one can get access to financing to be able to buy their home, or their home's value is so low that that's not really providing them the wealth or opportunity to move to where they want to be, or they don't have the income to move to where they want to be. But once we've sort of stabilized your home, we've supported these different career pathways to help individuals get access to high growth, high demand careers. Well, now they have the opportunity, they have the ability to make that choice, and we want them to choose Detroit. And so often, what helps people make the choice to choose Detroit is the arts and culture, the community, the public spaces that are around their home, that are around their neighborhood, that inspire them to stay in the city and stay connected to the people that they love and care about. And so we invest in arts and culture, invest in public spaces that help people be able to make that choice. A great example of that is something called the Jolos Greenway. This is a 27-mile greenway that connects all around the city of Detroit and a couple of municipalities that are adjacent to the city of Detroit. And it's not only a great public space, it's a beautiful public space. It's an old rail line that now connects all of these neighborhoods. So it's not only a great, beautiful public space with some really amazing park access and signage and entry points and bike lanes and everything, but it also is really a connection point for individuals, right? Whereas before, you may have been in a neighborhood, felt isolated, you're now connected to the entire city and other municipalities. It's also an economic development driver. We so often forget that public space creates wealth and creates, it really is a driver of economic development. We've seen this happen in cities all across the United States. Atlanta is a great example of that with the Beltline. We know that that's going to create wealth for residents that are right next to the Joe Louis Greenway. And so how do we sort of capture that and make sure that as much wealth stays in the city of Detroit as possible?
It's fascinating. Now, how is all of this made possible? Is it based upon that initial $500 million investment? How has this all worked out?
Yes, so far we've been proud to be able to deploy about 60% of that $500 million commitment. We are, as you mentioned at the beginning, we're about halfway through. We're at the 5-year point. So we're a little ahead of pace towards that $500 million commitment. And actually, the Gilbert Family Foundation has gone far above and beyond that $500 million commitment because we've also invested heavily to bring something called the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab to the city of Detroit and to invest in a brick and mortar research institute focused on curing neurofibromatosis. So we've also made about a $400 million commitment to that sort of healthcare space that is not even captured in our $500 million commitment to the city of Detroit. So we are very proud to see all of these pieces coming together. It is about 350 million come from the Gilbert Family Foundation and 150 million comes from the Rocket Community Fund. So these organizations are really working hand in hand to deploy that capital towards one strategic sort of framework that really centers on individuals in the city of Detroit who are at risk of displacement, but who through these resources are able to get opportunity, get home ownership, and ultimately we hope thrive.
Yeah, yeah. And now tell me how employees at Rocket are involved with some of these initiatives through volunteer efforts or whatnot.
Rocket Companies, I think, sets the bar for volunteering. Most corporate environments have about a 30% volunteering and giving rate among employees. Rocket is really proud that this is an expectation of being part of Rocket Companies. This is part of our community. This is part of who we are. And so we see about a 70% employee engagement, team member engagement rate. And there's any number of ways that they can participate. It goes everything from, giving to our annual crowdfunding campaign, where many of the partners that we work with on a regular basis are receiving funding and support directly from our team members, or it could be as specific as skilled-based volunteering. So we have a ton of extremely skilled team members. Think about all of the technology resources, the AI tools and capabilities that our team members bring to the table, and all of the needs that our partners have. That tends to not be as much of a skill set of our nonprofit partners. They're really often in the position of reacting to technology changes. And so it can be extremely meaningful for our team members to bring their skills and abilities to the table in support of these nonprofit partners.
That's so cool that they're using their specialized skill sets to strengthen nonprofit organizations and the partners that you have there. Because you're right, so often, technology is not on the forefront of people's minds when they're trying to do that hard work in communities on a daily basis
Yeah.
with their hands, right? So I always, when I think of people that are on the forefront of AI and technology, I always think of Rocket and Rocket Company. So I'm thrilled to find out that some of those technological resources are being deployed to help the entire city of Detroit.
Absolutely. I think it's such
Yeah,
a meaningful partnership, and we're always looking for it's kind of like matchmaking, you're looking for what's the need on the ground and what kinds of tools do we have in our toolkit and levers could we pull to meet that need.
it's really great that you're doing that. I'm sure it's so fulfilling for the people that are able to help out. Now, as we said, this is halfway through the mission, and I'm curious, like, what are you planning for the rest of 2026 and beyond?
Yeah. Our work really responds to the needs that we see within this group of people that we serve. So we're constantly collecting data and information about the people that we serve at an aggregated level, and we're trying to do our best to prioritize our investments based on what we've heard from these individuals. And with so many factors changing, with federal funding, with state funding, local funding changing, we also have to make adjustments in the way that we show up on a daily basis. So I think more than ever, there's opportunity in the city of Detroit to invest in things like infill housing and home ownership. It is really clear, we've dealt with much of the blighted housing that existed in the city of Detroit. There's been a huge focus in prior administrations around demolition. And we've been able very successfully to stem the flow of property tax foreclosure, which is fantastic.
Mm.
Now, some of the big challenges when it comes to housing are housing quality, especially home repair for existing housing stock. And we just don't have the construction muscle, the manufacturing muscle at this point to build enough new housing. Between 2018 and 2023, there were only 44 new construction single family permits pulled in the city of Detroit. So we need to massively amplify that number to be able to meet the need of existing residents and anyone who's interested in moving to the city of Detroit. So I think those are a couple of the big investments that you can anticipate from the Gilbert Family Foundation and Rocket Community Fund.
Mm. When you talk about, home quality and home repairs, are you talking about like weatherization, making houses, more ecologically friendly as well by doing things like making sure that they have proper insulation, stuff like that? I know that's so incredibly important in the Northeast where I grew up, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Detroit.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Um, Also, there are so many needs with home repair. I think this is a big part of the challenge that houses, in terms of the value, our values are accessible and affordable in many respects. But then once people become homeowners, they often are overwhelmed by the repair needs in the home because a lot of times these are houses that were built before the 1960s. A lot of times they have lead and asbestos. Perhaps there was significant deferred maintenance because of other challenges like property tax foreclosure, for example. If you're not able to afford your tax bill, you're definitely not, taking actively maintaining, your roof or your HVAC system. And so a lot of
Mm,
times deferred maintenance has really built up over time. Um, so those are just a couple of examples. Weatherization is certainly extremely important and a component of that whole home approach, but also things like, my porch is falling down, my roof has a hole in it. I need new windows, those are just a few examples.
okay. Okay. Well, thank you for explaining that to us, Laura. And thank you so much for sitting down with us today. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Just that if any of your listeners are curious about the city of Detroit, you should come and visit. It has changed so much in the past 10, 15, 20 years. If you were here before, you need to see it again. It is a really beautiful, vibrant city with amazing neighborhoods, amazing people, and we're really proud to be here and be part of that change and evolution.
Sure you are. And you're right, Laura. It is a city that has dramatically changed. I was there in September and it was just lovely at that time of year. So
Yeah.
I hope that our listeners take heed with that and at least pay the city of Detroit a visit and maybe even consider moving up there. But again, I know you have so many challenges. I'm so glad that you are tackling these head on in the capacity that you can, Laura.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Once again, my name is Kimberly Hawes. Have a great day.